Podsmash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer.
We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite, and 80-Bit Podsmash is a weekly podcast where we talk about video games primarily, and we smash it together with topics that you care about, such as art, history, music,
pop culture, comics, movies,
politics, which we delayed this episode having a very long conversation about just now.
Yeah, we did.
It was nuts. So we were recording a little bit later than we normally do. So hopefully we'll be able to stay coherent.
We've already almost finished our beers.
I know. That's one. Well, you have.
Yeah.
I was talking too much and wasn't drinking enough, apparently. But yeah, so that's what 80-Bit Podsmash is. And we are drinking Goose Islands again.
We are, but they're different ones.
Yes.
Because I got a pack of 4 different types of beers. So I am having the Goose Island IPA, which is their standard India Pale Ale that is bright citrus and hoppy and amazing. It's a staple. It's a normal beer. It's a go-to IPA that I would get anytime if you like those. And Penguin here is drinking the 4 Stars Pils, which is, I had a sip of it and it was surprisingly hoppy for a Pilsner.
Yeah, it's very hoppy.
And I was like, oh, this is almost a pale ale. In fact, if I was blind testing it, I'd probably identify it as a pale ale.
Yeah, that's fair. This has nothing to do with the beers we're drinking, but I read a very interesting thing about beer today.
Yeah.
And that is salty foods inhibit the bitter. Like if you eat something salty, it kind of nullifies the bitter receptors on your tongue. So that's why restaurants offer salty snacks like chips and pretzels when you're drinking, is because it'll nullify the sort of bitter taste of the beer.
I always thought it was just make you thirsty and make you buy more drinks.
It's still the same thing is accomplished because they inhibit the bitter, which makes all the hoppy, bittery beers taste more smooth. And so they go down easier, therefore prompting you to buy more.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. I didn't know that there were like tastes that would like neutralize other tastes.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense as to why people like cleanse their palates and stuff when they're wine tasting and whatnot. But
Starbucks does it with coffee.
Yeah. So
all kind of things. Have this coffee with chocolate, changes everything. Have this coffee with cherry, changes it all. Eat some dirt and drink some coffee, it changes everything.
Well, now I want to do that. I want to have like a pocket full of like potato chips when I go out to the bar and see what kind of beers I like more with salt.
Yeah.
So
it's a thing.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, what's going on today other than our 45-minute long political conversation?
It is the last day of spring, and I noticed that it was very bright when I was driving here, in contrast to that crazy night that we recorded months ago. It was pitch dark, and there was police blocking the road, and I had no idea what was going on, and there was like a blockade on both sides of your neighborhood that was like not letting people in or out. So that was interesting. But that was like 7:30 and pitch dark, and
right? Because it was like
8:45
February or something.
And it was still like bright, and I was like, "Wow, what a difference!" I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, my birthday is this weekend. I know that
we already sung "Happy Birthday."
We already talked about it, yes.
Ago.
But from our recording perspective, my birthday's coming up, and I always love this time of year. Other than the hot, like I hate the days, but like the afternoon, evenings. This time of year, it's always like, it's the longest time of the year. Yeah, the solstice is tomorrow, and I just really, I like it when the days start to get a little bit longer because you get more of that daylight. I mean, it was like 9 o'clock and you could still kind of see the sunlight going down around the horizon. So it's crazy.
I love it.
Solstices are weird things.
That's one thing I'm willing to give up though with daylight savings time. If we were just to get rid of daylight savings altogether because we sprung forward. So the reason why it's still bright at 9 is because it's actually 8. Yeah. And so I'd be okay with it being dark at 8. But that's just me.
Arizona doesn't have daylight savings time. Yeah. I wonder how that works, like with the rest of the country.
Oh, it sucks. You drive across the border and you have to like switch your clocks.
That's stupid.
Yeah,
Arizona. Mm-hmm. Or I guess rest of the country, get with it. Get rid of daylight savings time.
Daylight savings time is just. I never realized how bad or how much of a problem it is until you have a kid. And it's just everything sucks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of it's just completely jacked. Yeah.
Yep. Crazy. It is crazy though when I wake up from my early shift and it's already light outside because it's like 5:30 and I'm like, what? It's light outside. So it does make a difference for me driving into work, but still, I would, for your sake, be willing to part with it.
Yes.
Cool. So in the same way that daylight savings time is our favorite,
it's not our favorite thing.
It's not our favorite thing. We don't like daylight savings time, but instead, let's talk about doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. I like that we kind of both bounced while doing that.
Yeah, we did.
We're like bouncing around. Yeah,
that's how we do. And if we ever do a live panel, you guys will see it.
You'll see the head bobbing. Yeah, favorite things is a segment that we like to do as sort of a way to kind of catch everybody up on the things that we're digging this week. So what we're interested in, what Penguin and Termite is their favorite thing this week. So
my favorite thing this week is a book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, The Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing by Marie Kondo.
Nice.
She is, I don't know anything about the author at all, but her book incites Japanese culture mentality to the art of your house and like how it's laid out and the stuff that you own and all this crazy stuff that boils down to reducing lots of things that you own because boiling down to the decision of whether or not it brings you joy. So you go through this process of touching everything you own. Everything. You blanket like across the house. You divide it into categories, not by rooms, which is totally different and mind-blowing. Because I'm like, I walk into the bathroom, I'm like, this place is a hot mess. Yeah. I need to go into the sink and reorganize. And like, well, no, you're going to take all of the toiletries from all of your bathrooms and you're going to put them together in one room. And you're going to say, what do I need and what do I don't need? What brings me joy? And the categories for which brings you joy versus what brings me joy are entirely personal. And you have your own personal reasons for it, which just gets rid of all of the outside influences on your decision. So like, if someone gives you a shirt you're never going to wear, but you hang on to it because it was a gift, this gives you that opportunity, like, you're touching this shirt. I don't like it. I will never wear it. The joy was when it was a gift. It served its purpose because it was a joyous moment when I received the gift. Let's get rid of the shirt. Like, it brings you outside of your, like, context of your everyday life, and it kind of, like, abruptly shifts your perspective of the things that you own, and it's awesome.
What if, like, I hate changing my oil, and so when I touch my oil filter wrench, I'm like, gosh, I hate this, and I hate everything about it, but I still need it to change oil.
The joy that you have with that wrench is that you're saving money. Like the joy that this wrench brings me is the ability to save my family money.
So you have to like be really in tune with the kind of nuanced gray areas of joy.
I guess so. That's why it's insanely personal. I can't tell you why you should feel joyous about your wrench, but sure, you'll take all of your tools and throw them together and be like, when's the last time you'll analyze it yourself. Maybe you'll ask, when's the last time I used this? Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just be like, this brings me joy. I love this screwdriver. It's awesome. And I'm going to keep it because it makes me happy. And you can't really describe that. That's okay. Like, or you need the screwdriver to repair things, and repairing things brings you joy. So
none of that actually brings me joy, but not spending money on getting repairs gives me joy. Yeah, I guess.
And so anyway, it's really, really cool. It's a whole new way of thinking. And then after you reduce all the stuff that you own by touching it and analyzing its joyousness, you reorganize everything because you have so much less to deal with. And when you reorganize it, she also challenges you to change your perception as to, instead of organizing your house in such a way that things are easily attainable, you organize your house so that things are easily put awayable. I don't know what word that is, but you actually like emphasize the idea of putting things away. What is the easiest spot for me to put my shoes away so they're not in the way?
This sounds like a book that was written by like someone who is not me.
Yeah. Oh, like, you hate this. You're like cringing.
Everything sounds awful. It sounds like I feel like there's two kinds of people in this world, and it's a broad generalization. But there's the people who absolutely cannot function in a mess, and people who actually function better when there's a mess. And so for people who function better in messy environments, this all sounds like a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, she even says in the book that anyone can do it, and the excuse of being lazy or not tidy is not here in this book. You'd be able to find your way of doing it, and it's insanely personal, and that's what's cool about it. It's like no one's telling you how to organize. No one tells you have to get rid of anything, and no one's telling you like how to put your socks, but just giving you like some tips, like things you should think about in the process. And then
I'm going to be antagonistic. Yeah. For the sake of being antagonistic.
That is a penguin man thing to do.
It is.
Penguin princess.
And Penguin princess says, no, leave me alone and leave my stuff alone. And get your Japanese stuff out of my face. That's what he says.
Well, that's my favorite thing this week, because my wife and I completely went through our clothes, and we reduced 8 trash bags loaded with folded clothes.
I have joy for you that you have joy.
I'm extremely excited.
I touch you and have joy.
So you're glad I'm around? You're going to keep me around?
Yeah, I think so. So my favorite thing this week is a lot more simple. It's a pop culture thing. My wife and I started the 5th season that finally became available on Amazon Prime of a show that we love called Orphan Black. It's about clones. the first episode is the main character is in a subway station, and she sees a woman who looks just like herself jump in front of a train and commit suicide and kill herself. And so she decides, oh, well, she's kind of like a grifter, kind of like a con artist, and she's like, well, that was terrifying, but I'm going to take this opportunity to empty out her bank account because she looks just like me. And so she tries to, like...
This is crazy.
But then, like, she discovers... While doing this, she discovers that this woman was a cop and was investigating this whole conspiracy involving, like, her other clones. So it's all... She ends up running into and finding all of her other clones. And it becomes this crazy thing. So that's like the first episode is basically the show.
Jeez.
So it's all about, like, this conspiracy of all these clones.
Is it connected to other seasons, or is it like...
Yeah, there's 5 seasons. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's all...
So you should start from season 1.
You should start from season 1. It's one singular story. It is a really good show. It is worth watching for one reason alone. Even if you don't like the show or even like the idea of clones, the kind of sci-fi premise there, you should at least watch, like, the first season because... The lead actress is amazing because she plays basically like 12 different characters over the course of this entire show, and every single one of them feels unique and different. Like,
wow.
All the clones could be in this and can be in the same room, and you feel like you're watching separate actresses playing separate characters.
That's insane.
She embodies all of these characters so differently.
Yeah.
Like, on one hand, she'll be like this like super nerdy, like sciencey, like bohemian lesbian, and the other hand, she'll be this like very prim proper house mom, like, and then like she's this like hard drinking like grifter Cockney accent, like just crazy. Her name is Tatiana Maslany, and she won an Emmy for her performance on this show. So you should watch it just for like the sheer that reason. But super cool show. BBC, like, it used to come on right after Doctor Who. But their last season's on Prime now, so you can watch.
BBC crushing it with the good shows.
Oh yeah, it's pretty awesome. So
and they have Top Gear, or the good one, the good Top Gear.
Yeah,
and it had Sherlock.
Yep, Sherlock,
and
Doctor
Downton
Who,
Abbey, Doctor Who.
Yeah, BBC quality stuff.
Crushing.
And it's so annoying to like try to get some of it's really hard to get here in America.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But so that is my recommendation for our listeners if they're itching for a show to watch and have Amazon Prime, which they should. Come on, it pays for itself in shipping costs. And they are offering day 1 delivery now for qualifying orders over $35. This just became an Amazon Prime podcast.
When we become Twitch streamers, we'll be able to encourage our viewers to give us their Twitch Prime subscription.
Yeah, I don't know what qualifying orders means for Amazon Prime, because I feel like that's shifty legal language, but still, the idea of like any order over $35, which is any video game I pre-order, could be I guess it's day 1 delivery anyways, right. but you know what I mean, like same day delivery, or not same day.
Maybe you want it the day after it comes out. You don't get the discount, right? But you're like, I could have it today,
but I could have it. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah,
I'm smelling what you're saying.
Yeah, the 1 day shipping still pretty cool. Yeah, for free.
That's pretty
for
awesome.
Qualifying orders. Whatever that means.
Well, they've increased the price of Amazon Prime, so they should give us something.
Give something, yeah. So, anyways.
There's all this cool stuff with, like, Whole Foods, too. Apparently, if you walk into the store and you're a Prime member, you get
Twitch
discounts.
Prime, you can get...
Twitch Prime, that's what I just talked about. You get a free subscription.
Well, and you get, like, free games every once in a while and stuff like that, too.
Yeah,
so,
you do. Yeah.
I got Tales from the Borderlands from them, actually.
And I already had that on PSN.
Yeah. But, anyways, yes, Orphan Black. Amazing. Great show. So,
Orphan
Black. Yes, not Black Orphan, as one of my coworkers said today. He was like, "It's what is it again? Black Orphan?" And I was like, "Orphan Black." Like, that's a different show.
It's 2018, sir.
But yeah. Anyways, that's favorite things. Let's move on to our next segment, which is DLC. Downloadable content is a segment where we like to have sort of a mini discussion, something that a topic and a little conversation that we've generated and come up with ourselves that is something that maybe you never thought of before in relation to video games, or maybe not in relation to video games. But today's is in relation to video games. So my DLC came to me today because I was playing Uncharted and finishing the second one, and the thought came to my mind. We've talked before, we've done DLCs before about like what like thing from a video game would you have, like powers, like if you could have like any power from a video game, what would it be? But I was playing Uncharted, and, you know, Nathan Drake's just a normal dude, more or less. Like, he's in good shape, but, like, he's just a dude. He has no superpowers, no, like, enhanced abilities, and there are plenty of games like that where it's just, you're playing just basically normal dudes who are put into extraordinary circumstances.
Tomb Raider.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tons and tons of games. Last of Us, all of it. And so I'm sitting here watching Nathan Drake just do incredibly physically exhausting things. Like, playing that game sometimes makes me exhausted. Like, oh my gosh, here I am sitting on the couch and I don't exercise at all. And how is he still going? How are you still doing this?
Yeah.
And so that was my DLC idea for the day, is if you could do a physical task without any, or what physical task from a video game that characters do seemingly inexplicably because they have no in-game superpowers. We're not talking about your Master Chiefs who are super soldiers. We're not talking about your God of War. He's a freaking god. So yes, of course,
even Zelda.
My suspension,
he's a Hylian with magical abilities.
Yeah. My suspension of disbelief is higher because I'm of course you can chop that tree down with 3 swings because you're a deity. But no, I'm talking about Nathan Drake. My suspension of disbelief gets a little bit stretched because I'm how are you climbing this thing? So what would be the physical task that these characters do that you wish that you could do without any aid of superpowers or anything like that?
As an endurance athlete, I think it's the endurance. It's this character has gone days in a row with no sleep, little to no food or water, and they are still climbing buildings, jumping massive chasms, and fighting enemies, hand-to-hand combat even.
Yeah.
With physically exhausting stuff for days after days with nothing. Or even being imprisoned and held captive for days with, like I said, little nutrition.
Yeah, I wish I could knock people out without making any sound whatsoever.
That'd be a good one too.
I was sure you were going to say I wish you could run without stopping.
I'm kind of hinting at that. It's the infinite level of physical ability. It's just keep going. Just keep going forever. Right. And yeah.
I think specifically I would like their ability to seemingly defy all laws of physics when it comes to hanging over edges.
Yes.
Nathan Drake looks like a meaty dude, and yet he must have the finger strength of 7 tarantulas because he can hold on to a cliff edge.
Yeah.
Just absurdly. And then there's a moment where there's several moments where he jumps and someone catches him.
Yep.
I know that there is some basis in reality for that. If your surface area is spread out enough, then you should be able to support someone's weight. But that still also requires an absurd amount of upper body, shoulder strength and arm strength, and some of these
elbows,
petite women catching Nathan Drake his not only his full weight, but his full weight plus gravity plus momentum. I'm they would get pulled off the edge, and it stresses me out, man. So that ability that these characters seem to have to just Spider-Man level hand strength is just absurd. So I think that would be it. Also, the aforementioned being able to move around and sneak up on people and knock them out, not only within seconds, but also by making no noise. That's incredible to me.
Yeah.
How do they do it?
I'm just gonna hang on your neck and you're done.
Because you know how long it actually takes to knock someone out?
Apparently it's forever.
It's a long, and it takes even longer to kill someone by choking them.
Yeah.
All movies and video games and everything, it's 5 seconds or something like that, and then they're out or they're dead. And it's you actually have to keep choking. I know this sounds morbid, and you might be wondering, why does the penguin know this? But
and also for your kids, you might want to skip ahead a few seconds.
Yeah, sorry. But you can, you have to actually keep choking someone beyond the point where they stop struggling before they're dead. Mm-hmm. So, because you actually have to restrict the airway long enough to starve their brain of oxygen. Right. Yeah. So, morbid fact of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these video game characters seem to be able to completely ignore that law of physics.
For the sake of a good game.
Yeah, for the sake of a good game. There's also a moment today that I saw it was very clear. Because I was trying to make a jump in Uncharted, and I was I don't think I'm going to be able to make this jump, but I did it anyways. If you die, you go right back to where you were. And I very clearly saw Nathan Drake's body, the character model, horizontally shift.
Yep. There's gravity points, right? So it's you jump, and then all of a sudden the character model doesn't.
He's arcing, but then he's suspended in air, moves very slightly, and you're that was poorly animated.
Yep.
But it's okay. It was so good. Cool. That's DLC for the day. Yay!
All right.
All right. So now we can move on to our main topic, which I'm sure you all are anxious to hear what we're talking about today. Termite, do you want to introduce this topic?
We are talking about genre relevancy in games.
Yeah. So we're kind of, you guys have heard us do a couple of deep dives now where we go very specifically into like the history and the impact of specific genres. We're kind of zooming out a little bit and talking about kind of genres as a whole and the idea of genres in games. Again, we're not talking about anything specific, but we're more talking about like, is it possible for genres to remain relevant? Is it possible for genres to become outdated and this is no longer a genre that should be made anymore or something like that?
Right.
So
it's an interesting topic. I kind of run it in parallel with movies, especially with the behemoth of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how the Avengers movies blend all of the different genres as the individual superheroes all kind of embody their own different genres. The Avengers once kind of shoved them all together. In the same way, when video games were first created, a genre shift was huge because they didn't really exist. Gaming's still new. So here's a clear platformer. Here's a clear airplane space shooter.
Well, they weren't even thinking about genres.
Racing game.
They were more just like, let's make a game that you do this in.
Right.
And then genres began to emerge as more and more people were like, oh, that works. Let's make more of those kinds of games.
But the gaps between them were huge. It was a clear shift.
Right.
Mario is a platformer.
Right.
Space Invaders is a shooter.
Yeah.
Spy Hunter is a racer. Big time difference. And then, now that we're seeing the current generation of games, storytelling has kind of evolved in games. AAA kind of big budget movie blockbuster ideas and paradigms have leaked their way into gaming. Now we have genre blending like crazy. No game is, it's almost hard to describe what the difference between an action game is versus an action RPG versus an RPG. Just those three words are kind of these ambiguous, Zelda apparently has always been an RPG, but so is Final Fantasy. I'm how does that work?
Yeah.
And
you're always going to have people who are like, oh, no, but Zelda's not an RPG. It's an
action game.
It's an action game, but then,
what's
or an adventure game. Yeah. But then based on the definition of RPG, it's well, no, but you're playing a character and you're, and so it's hard to how do we define things versus how do we describe things, if that makes sense? At what point is, because the definition is supposed to be well, anything that matches that definition is that thing.
Right.
Whereas opposed to genres emerge because you're just describing the game. You're oh yeah, it's an action adventure game. But then later RPG comes out to describe a very specific type of game. But then that descriptor actually ends up kind of working well for, other games too. Zelda, God of War, they all could be considered RPGs. But RPG was originally meant to describe a very specific type of game. So it's just kind of weird how it gets blendy like that. But this topic kind of came to me because I was reading a review on Hyrule Warriors, actually, which I've been playing kind of as my turn my brain off game. And I got my Switch at work and it's a little slow. I don't have any calls, so I'm gonna do a Hyrule Warrior round or two. It's kind of low commitment and low stress game.
Yeah, you can do rounds and whenever, you can pause it whenever you want.
Exactly.
You don't have any skin in the game. Nothing really matters.
Exactly.
It's not competitive and you have nothing on the line.
Exactly. It's just more for
comfort
fun.
Food.
Just
I call it comfort games.
It's comfort game. Anyway, so I love the franchise, but I was reading a review on it and they were like, this game is so outdated. This game is so it's it's the same as every Dynasty Warriors game you've ever played, and it's the combat is so repetitive and and obsolete is essentially what they're trying to get at. There are whole genres of games that do this better, I guess, is what they're trying to, is what it came across as this. So combat being repetitive, if you're criticizing the game for kind of the things that all games have in common, that's one thing, and I'm fine with that. So him calling the combat repetitive is, okay, that's fair. That's a valid criticism. But when you're saying, but what kind of got me was well, is it really obsolete? Can we no longer make games like this just because other games have done this better? Just because more kind of call them modern innovations have come about. And so that kind of brings us to the first question. Can games or genres or types of games become obsolete?
I think there's they're mixing or confusing the idea of quality of life enhancements upon a certain genre. Yeah. And they're thinking that if you just take Hyrule Warriors, which is actually an extension of the Dynasty Warriors games. There's a name for it, and I don't know it off the top of my head. It's the creator who made them. Yeah, it's kind of Koei, I think. Koei Games.
Tecmo or something like that.
Yeah. One of those is the name of a person, and one's a developer or a publisher. But regardless, that whole family of games, they're saying, and their claim is, if you want a single person to fight hordes and hordes of enemies, maybe Batman, the Arkham series, has done this better.
Yes.
Maybe the Shadows of Mordor and Shadows of War have done this better, where you're fighting hordes of orcs, and like the combat is more articulate, more intentional, and it looks better. It's more animated,
more strategic, and more risky because you feel like the enemies are actually a threat, as opposed to in the Warriors games, it's all kind of, they're just standing there, and you mostly are just fodder for your awesome combos.
Right. So they're claiming that that evolution exists, so therefore we shouldn't go back. And that's inherently, I could not disagree more.
Yeah,
with
I
that,
agree. Yeah, I agree with your disagreement.
Yeah, I love going back to older games. Like, older games do not become obsolete, and in fact, the indie movement is proving them false. I'm going to say, as a blanket answer to that question, can genres become obsolete? Absolutely not. No. And we can point to the indie movement as evidence for that.
Yeah,
we're now making 8-bit and 16-bit pixel art games. We're taking like Minecraft, which everyone's like, that's totally dated looking. Why would you do this? And they're making like Pokemon Quest, which is a free-to-play mobile Switch game thing that looks just like it, but it's a Pokemon game, and it's doing really well. So I would say no genres become obsolete in their evolution, and at some point we're always going to look back and like recreate something because it makes us feel nostalgic, and then change it just a little bit to make it new. But it doesn't make any genre obsolete, because has any book genre ever become obsolete? Has any movie genre ever become obsolete? Does anyone just stop making blockbuster summer action movies because Michael Bay took over and everyone hates him? And
right.
I love Michael Bay movies.
I mean, but there is a sort of sense of like, with movies, sure, it would be really cool to see like a noir film, like kind of a modern noir film. But you would expect it to kind of bring modern filmmaking techniques,
right? And that's the evolution of technology, storytelling, and art.
So I can see the argument being like, well, games like Hyrule Warriors, for example, should do more to bring modern game design techniques into it. Another similar article I had read was in criticism of Diablo 3. And they were mostly talking about how, like, what they would want from Diablo 4 is it to look like an entirely different
game?
Gothic. Yeah, entirely different game is what they were describing, is because they're like, this top-down, like other games, the Path of Exile, Torchlight, they've done what Diablo started better, and so Diablo 3 should now, like, Diablo should move Blizzard should move Diablo into like more of a modern RPG game design. And I don't know what they necessarily had in mind. I mean, maybe they were thinking kind of like a similar shift to like what God of War did, where it was no longer a fixed camera, and more of like there was no longer sort of like an emphasis on quantity of enemies, but like quality of enemies and quality of strategy, as opposed to just mindlessly repeating the most effective combo. Like, so maybe that's what they kind of had in mind.
Right. It just comes out as like, that's all of a sudden obsolete. No, if you move Diablo 4 to a different type of like look, so it's not a top-down monster killer anymore, it doesn't make Torchlight, Path of Exile, and Titan Quest bad. And there'll be new
what they were
ones
saying was
come out that will take the reins over, and they'll still make those games.
Right. But that's what they were saying, is they were like, but Torchlight and Path of Exile have done this better than Diablo 3 did, so Diablo should move into like a more innovative direction. Whereas I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Right. I agree that like, it would be really cool to see a Diablo game that was like over the shoulder, third person dynamic camera. Like, that would be really cool. I wouldn't hate that, but at the same time, like, would it be Diablo? I still like Diablo 3, and I still think that that top-down monster killer loot explosion type style game is still like a valid form of RPG or whatever you want to call it, and I like it. I still like that style in the same way that I still like the Warriors games, even if like they don't quite incorporate modern game design.
They don't evolve past themselves.
Yeah.
They stay with the same kind of base mechanics. And that leads right into your question here is, are game clones a problem? And I refrain to use problem, because I think there's a good spot for clones and not. And I want to highlight like some different franchises that have done this. So I'm going to
I worded it as a problem in order to specifically incite discussion, because I think there's definitely some nuance with clones. I think there's some pros and cons, but yes, sure. Yeah,
so you have the Resident Evil games were all fixed camera until 4. Resident Evil 4 came out, and they did over-the-shoulder third person, completely changed the whole franchise, and went in a different direction. They evolved past what all of the previous iterations of Resident Evil was, to massive criticism. The Legend of Zelda. Well, I'm going to put Nintendo in their own box in a minute. I'm going to get there. Final Fantasy. They were all quote-unquote clones.
Yeah.
Graphical prowess aside, until 11 when it was an MMO, and then 13 when it became something totally different, and now 15, which is like a crazy action RPG instead of anything turn-based. So they've completely evolved and changed past themselves, and like now when you say Final Fantasy, you kind of don't know what to expect. And there are franchises who have not done this, and that is Assassin's Creed, Uncharted. Those have stayed the same and added flourishings underneath that are slightly different. And I think there's a good place for both. If you release an Assassin's Creed tactical RPG, okay, question mark. Gears of War is doing this with Gears of War Tactics. Like, okay, you're telling the story of the Gears realm in a different way, but it's still an offshoot, and you're getting Gears of War 5, which has been the same. It's another franchise that has stayed the same. Over-the-shoulder, third-person shooter. And so I think that there's like, I don't know what causes it, but at some point you have a franchise that's just expected to be the same. And I would hope Diablo 4 would stay the same, because that's what Diablo is. And if you want to evolve past that, it should be good. And then if not, so I don't know why these things happen, but we have good examples of both situations where you have a franchise evolving and a franchise kind of staying the same with flourishings. And both are equally fun and good.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider when talking about clones, and the thing that I primarily wrote this question down to address was, like, when people say, "Oh, this game is a Destiny clone," what they mean is, "Oh, this game basically plays the same way as Destiny, but it's just made by a different developer." A good thought that comes to mind, or a good example that comes to mind, is like Darksiders 1 specifically. Like, Darksiders 1 is very much a Zelda clone, because it's structured the same way that Zelda is, has a little bit of a different combat style, but it's clearly like, oh, it's meant to kind of like hit the same buttons as Zelda. And, you know, what we were talking about, it looks, people are worried or perceiving of Anthem in such a way as it's a Destiny clone. And people talk about that as if it's a bad thing, but I think that, you know, where I think it's like clone games are not a problem is because like that there have been some great games that essentially have been just clones of other games. The aforementioned Darksiders, I think it's great that it's a Zelda clone because very few other games do what Zelda does well. The Tomb Raider franchise took itself in a direction after Uncharted came out that was more, you know, similar to what Uncharted did, you know, and made it more. So one might say, well, Uncharted's a Tomb Raider clone, and then the new Tomb Raider is an Uncharted clone. You know what I mean? So they kind of like share. But that's what I'm saying is like, even if a game is a clone, quote unquote, clone of another game, where it's a new it's the same game. Same, like, similar mechanics, similar game, but just wrapped up in a new IP. Like, that's, I think, fine, because we've seen some really great games come out of that. And it's just sort of the innovation that comes along. Like, why would you complain about, like, more of a game?
Just because it's like something else?
Just because it's someone else. Like, just because someone else
awesome.
made it. Yeah, exactly. Like, wouldn't you want, when you finish, especially these single-player games that are meant to be, like, kind of, like, one and done. Like, you finished it and now it's over and you don't really revisit it except for nostalgia or grindy. Like those experiences, like, there's so many times when I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish The Last of Us, you know, I wish Last of Us 2 was out because I just finished Last one. Or Horizon Zero Dawn. Oh my gosh, I wish it was out. Like, why wouldn't you then want to, like, go play another game that's very similar and hits those same buttons? Like, and I get it. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, this isn't as good. I've had that experience before too, but I don't know. I think that, like, oftentimes people are like, oh, this game's just a clone of this other game. And they say that, like, very derogatorily, where it's like, oh, no, that can be a good thing. But I do kind of see the other side of it, where, like, it can be, like, especially multiplayer games, you have people that are like, I'm a Battlefield person, I'm a Call of Duty person. You do then kind of end up splitting the player base on games that are more or less indistinguishable.
I was about to, like, we have to mention Call of Duty and Battlefield. We're totally, like, dancing around them. Battlefield was way different in the Battlefield 1942 game. Nothing like anything Call of Duty was doing. And, like, Counter-Strike was a lot like Call of Duty and, like, small deathmatch, player versus player shooting combat. Battlefield was like, no, we're going to take that and make it a giant battlefield, for lack of a better word, with vehicles, and it's going to be set in World War II, kind of like Call of Duty originally was. But they felt different. They had different, like, classes within, and then Call of Duty kind of adopted some Battlefields, and then Battlefield sort of adopted some of Call of Duties, and they are still different today. But
they look different.
They're extremely similar. And there are other grindy multiplayer shooters that have taken, like, Rainbow Six Siege. And now we have the big Battle Royale kind of fight happening with PUBG and Fortnite, and now all the other, like, Black Ops 4 Battlegrounds confirmed, or whatever, Battle Royale confirmed, and Battlefield 5 is Battle Royale confirmed. and I've said battle like 80 million times, but like now we see them cloning each other now, and no one's kind of like looking at that as a bad thing. But then Anthem gets talked about as a Destiny clone, and that's
thing,
derogatory. And I'm like, hold on, Microsoft just showed off this game called Tunic that looks like a little fox, literally dressed as Link, doing Link-like things with rupees coming out of enemies when you kill them, and I'm like, I want to play this so badly. I was so excited when I saw Tunic because it looked like a Zelda clone. I was like, that attracted to like. So I think it's a good thing. If something is successful and it's working, why not do the same thing but add your own like twist to it? Now, if you're just copy and paste,
right?
Which I heard there was the Zelda clone that was on PlayStation. I don't remember the name of it. It's like shameless. It's bad, and like it really is a Zelda clone.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's like just copying off someone else's creativity.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you don't like video game genre clones, then why do you listen to more than one podcast? They're all people talking through a microphone. They're all the same. Like, oh, you're just a podcast clone. Well, you know, like you kind of boil it down, you get silly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that you brought up battle royales because I think it's so indicative of kind of where the industry is right now, and it kind of ties together all the things that we were talking about, where it's like we get frustrated when developers just kind of go with what the current trend is. So it's like I saw this really cool infographic, I guess, or meme or something, and it was like it kind of just showed like this was the era of first-person shooter, like just sort of competitive multiplayer first-person shooter deathmatch style, and then there was like, and then there were the MMORPGs, and then there were the hero shooters. I'm definitely doing like, I'm not doing it justice because they went through and broke down like by like years.
Yeah,
you saw like a surge of all these same game types.
Yeah,
and then he's like rise and fall, and it's like now we're in the quote-unquote era of battle royales, and it's like every developer feels like they have to.
That's what people want.
And it's like, you almost see that there's either two sides of the camp. There's either like, oh, we shouldn't innovate at all and just keep doing the same thing, or, oh, we need to like constantly keep up with what's the trends. And it's like, I think it's, I mean, in some cases, I think it's right to innovate. I think it was great that God of War was like, oh, let's update this franchise and make it more in line with what we're currently seeing with these action hack and slash games. I think it's great that Breath of the Wild's another example.
Yeah, I was going to get into Nintendo. Like, I was going to put Nintendo in their own conversation. Yeah, we're just going to like wait to talk about Nintendo. In a minute.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, I mean, still think that now is a good time to like talk about how Breath of the Wild just like
completely.
Like, again, we're not entirely overhauling it, but we're adapting it and adding some modern techniques. But then a game like Hyrule Warriors, which again, like you said, it's a sort of soul food for games, like comfort games. Yeah. Like, it's not really something that you really need to. It would be cool to see them innovate, but neither is it a knock against them, I think, to sit there and say, oh, because they haven't innovated, like, it's bad.
Our genre conversation is quickly turning into a should you innovate or not conversation.
Yeah, well,
and that's fine. I do want to say this is kind of cool. PUBG was like this indie developer who did something risky with no...
Yeah.
Like, it's risky in the sense of his life, but as far as, like, a publisher or a studio being shut down and multiple lives being, like, jobs, being, like, lost... He had no risk to do this, to create PUBG, like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. But when he started that, that was the innovation. That was the new step that now everyone sees the success of and is like flocking towards the money because that's what makes it. Yeah. Because if you are a publisher and you're going to fund a studio to make a game, you're not going to fund a studio to make a game that's in opposition to this thing over here who's attracting millions and actually compete with that. You're going to be like, hey, I'll fund your game, but maybe you should stick a mode in there that looks like that PUBG thing because I want to get a part of that crowd. I don't want to like create a new pillar. I want to use that one. And so like there's this whole publisher like marketing money. It's all about it boils down to the money and like businessy decisions. But it's cool to see how long it takes the industry to shift in a certain direction, like giant pendulum swings, like going back and forth. And I'd love to see that graphic. You should find it, put it on Reddit. Because you can find us on Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and 80bitpodsmash.com. Our tag is at 80bitpodsmash, and we have a Facebook 80bitpodsmash and a subreddit 80bitpodsmash.
It's showing up now in like the third quarter of our podcast.
Yeah, you can find us there. So relate to us, talk to us, and see what genres you love. We're far from being done with this episode. I just wanted to throw that in there as Dan should share this.
Squeeze.
Penguin Man should share this graphic because if you look at the Quake shooters and the copies thereof, Unreal Tournament. There's a whole bunch of them, like Soldiers of Fortune, the Jedi Academy. Like all of those games used the Quake engine because it was successful, and you could modify it quickly, and you could make games that felt and played the same way with their own little minor tweaks and stuff. So like those genres are still intact between the games, but
as a side kind of conversation question that I have that relates to sort of game clones, is there any game franchise out there that you're surprised has not been copied more, or that the format has not been copied more? I can tell you one that comes to my mind while you're thinking.
Yeah.
I think I've always thought it's fascinating that more people didn't copy Smash Bros. Like, not the idea of, like, taking all of your intellectual properties. Like, Marvel vs. Capcom has been doing that for years.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
Battle Royale or whatever, All-Stars.
I'm talking about the idea of, like, the platformer fighting game where it's percentage-based.
Yeah.
And you're trying to knock the whole way you win is by knocking people off.
I'll tell you why. It doesn't do well financially. Smash Bros. Is not one of Nintendo's big franchise system sellers. It's not as successful as Pokemon. Pokemon is the behemoth. Mario is giant. Zelda and Smash Bros. are the minority of Nintendo's franchises, believe it or not. And then Star Fox, Kirby, and Yoshi are even like smaller.
Wow.
But yeah, Smash Bros.
That's surprising to me.
Yeah, I haven't done actual numbers to bring it up, but if you look at the difference in units moved from like Mario games, and that's why you see so many more Mario games. I guess we can talk about Nintendo now. And you see so many Zelda games, like those are the big wigs because they make more money, so Nintendo has more money put towards developing those things.
Yeah.
So that's probably why. And PlayStation tried it with their PlayStation Battle All-Stars, whatever it was called, and it flopped miserably. Mm-hmm. And you don't have the IP of Nintendo. Like,
but did it
that's
like?
the thing.
But that's my question: is did it play the same way? Like I'm talking about from a gameplay.
It was very, very close. It was very similar. It had the platforms, it had the multiple characters from IP, and then like it had you build up a bar for yourself by hitting others, and you can't kill anyone, quote unquote, KO, unless that bar's full, and you do like there's level 1, level 2, and a level 3 like moves.
Interesting.
And so like it's
so
the same, still kind similar,
of,
but not the percentage based. It's like you're charging yourself up to a point where now you have the ability to. So
instead of charging someone else up,
you're charging yourself up.
You're charging yourself up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weird. And so yeah, let's talk about Nintendo. So Nintendo's the only developer that I know that will completely innovate within their own franchises. In fact, they won't make a game unless it innovates something. They don't make clones of themselves at all. And look at the jump. I mean, you can start in the NES era. Look at Mario 1 and Mario 3.
Yeah.
And look at Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. Like, vastly different. And they continue to do that. Breath of the Wild was a perfect example. But even the jump of like Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask. Look how different Majora's Mask is. Nintendo was like, yeah, Zelda Ocarina of Time was amazing. We're not going to just make a sequel with more.
Right.
We're going to change it. All of Nintendo's sequels, unless they're like expansions or DLCs, are always like something different.
Yeah, but I still even with like, let's just take the kind of I'll call them middle 2000, early 2010s Zelda games.
Yeah.
Like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess.
Skyward Sword.
Oh, and Skyward Sword. Yeah, even Skyward Sword. Like even though they all do, like you said, have wildly different mechanics and wildly different things and items and stuff like that, they still kind of all follow a very similar formula, especially when it comes to like how you progress through the game. Like
third-person adventure puzzle solver,
but also like there's sort of these sort of Zelda tropes,
and that's same with Final Fantasy
formula and stuff like that. Whereas I feel like and even those like 2D titles kind of follow that same Zelda formula, and I didn't really see a major like break of that formula until Breath of the Wild, where again,
Breath of the Wild was definitely the biggest jump.
Yeah, because again they got rid of the whole idea of like instead of like collecting all of the tools you need as you go, it's like no, we're gonna give them all to you together and emphasize exploration. Yet it still felt like a Zelda game because you're still solving puzzles. They just gave you much more freedom in how you decided to solve those puzzles, and that was like that wildly innovative. Also the emphasis on exploration and kind of survival light freedom. Yeah, like again, those were huge changes to how the very formula of the game was played. I mean, and God of War is another great example. It's like huge shift in like the way you approach this game.
I guess gaming has existed long enough now that we're in an era of let's reboot titles, and so like we're getting old franchises completely redone, and Nintendo actually followed the trend in that regard.
Yeah, I mean it sounds like again, like there's a lot of like modern kind of the big modern elements these days that games tend to, or at least we'll say single player games tend to gravitate towards, is open world, kind of freedom of exploration.
And that's like the battleground of single player. Right?
It's
Skyrim was really successful. Everyone loved it.
Yeah.
Let's like move everything to
more
open
of
world.
that.
You
Yeah.
get The Witcher 3 and
the
Fallout 4.
I was gonna say, and
Breath of the Wild.
And even
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Fallout has seen kind of like, Fallout's seen like 3 to even 4 with 76 coming out, has seen kind of 3 major, because like I was surprised to find out, I didn't know that like Fallout was like a turn-based strategy game in the original, like the first one.
Yeah.
And then what was it, Fallout 3 that
It was the first open world one.
was the first open world one?
Yep.
Okay, it was Fallout 2 first-person shooter style?
I don't know the original ones were like top-down, almost Diablo-like.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly,
like,
yeah. And so then Fallout 3
exploration
comes around. I remember seeing a very, again, snarky meme that was like, oh, Bethesda completely changed a franchise that you loved into something you didn't like, and they showed a picture of the first Fallout and Fallout 3 and like how different they were. So like, so Fallout 3 became a kind of open world first person shooter from what was like a top down real time strategy game,
Right.
and then now they made it even more open world with Fallout 4, and now they're shifting into like a possibly like open world multiplayer games as a service
Destiny
model
clone.
with Destiny. Yeah, exactly.
Games as a service is becoming a new genre that's come out of nowhere.
And
not out of nowhere, but
an innovation that's now becoming like considered modern game design, and more games are expected to include elements of it, which is like, on the one hand, I'm like, I am happy for games to innovate, but like it needs to be done smartly, and so it shouldn't just be like, we need to make this game just for the sake of making it. Granted, I'm super excited about Fallout 76.
Me too.
I'm super glad that God of War and Zelda innovated. I'm glad that Fallout. I don't think I would want to play Fallout games if they were still top down.
The same.
Yeah, the same. So it's just a weird balance, and so I think it results in a really interesting conversation. Like, when should a game innovate versus when should a game stay the same?
Right.
When should genres be retired, or should genres be retired, or when should they adapt in such a way that makes them more in line with modern game design? I do think it was really interesting that of all the games we saw at the PlayStation, the Sony E3, they all were more or less like behind the shoulder, third person,
single player action
games that had elements of stealth or elements of like
God of War clones.
Almost. It was like there was very similar, like a lot of similarities between. There was even moments between Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima where I'm like, I literally just saw this in the last trailer you showed. It's just now got a Japanese flavor. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and so is that like, I'm not saying those are going to be bad games, but I just think it's interesting that like they all looked very samey at the end of the day, and they're all kind of in that same genre, and that's touted as like modern game design.
Right.
And
just like it's the new thing to say no DLC and no loot boxes. It's like, you can see that the industry is trending in a different direction.
Yeah.
So open world became huge, and everyone chased it. And so we saw this release of open world games like crazy. The problem is open world games take freaking forever to build. So it took so long for that to gain momentum. And then by the time it did, we got a bunch of great open world games. At the same time, now we have these like single player AAA things that are bucking the trend of EA and Activision now to create these single player coherent beginning and
frankly, like
middle and beginning, middle and end experiences.
And frankly, I would love to see another Zelda game that's like Breath of the Wild, but I would also like to see another Zelda game that's like Twilight Princess or like Ocarina of Time, where it's that
do both
linear experience.
One game that has both. That'd be sweet.
Or even like 2 separate games. Just do like, I'm fine with it. If you released 2 Zelda games in like 2 years, I'd be totally cool with that. Like, or if Nintendo had a different studio or whatever within themselves. I mean, I'm not saying, but you know what I mean? Like, that'd be great. I would be thrilled for another Zelda game that was like a Switch game, Switch graphics, Switch style game that, or a Switch playable game that's another Zelda game.
A franchise that should not have changed genres, Star Fox. They went from the awesome like airplane shooter. Star Fox 64 was amazing, and then I personally love this game, but they came out with Star Fox Adventures made by Rare, and some people called it like a Legend of Star Fox, Ocarina of whatever, like because it was so much like Zelda. It was made by Rare, so it still had the collectathon kind of like feel from the N64 days. I loved that game. I thought it was amazing.
I thought it was great.
It did not do well. It was slammed. People hate it. It didn't do well. And then they kind of went back to the airplane-y shooter, but they can't just do the airplane shooter. They always throw in some more stuff. So like Star Fox Command and Star Fox Assault for GameCube and DS, I didn't really play them. They had some levels of like airplane combat, and then most of the rest of the game was like tank, submarine, other stuff. And then they had Star Fox Zero for the Wii U, another game I personally loved, but was just touted, it slammed, it did horribly, and they tried to innovate with the Wii U gamepad and like have all the motion controls on the screen and in front of you on the TV and have to use both to kind of aim separately, and they had this like remote control robot. Anyway, Nintendo did try to do genre shifting. Yeah. I think Nintendo does genre shifting more than anyone else.
Probably.
It's just they take so many risks and they flop. And I love that they do that. And they're constantly like changing their games. We're not going to just cookie cut our games. We're going to create something entirely different. We're going to take a huge risk.
Because then you end up with a year like we just had where you get two amazingly like crazy games, both of which were super innovative for their franchises. And I'm talking about Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. Yeah. And you know, they wouldn't, if they never took those risks, then we never would have gotten two amazing games. So it's like we want developers to be taking risks and be innovating and trying things, but we also want developers to like stick with what they do well. And like, so I'm definitely torn on this topic because I definitely want.
And that's what the 4 PS4 games we saw were all from 4 different developers. They're all going to add their own flavor to them, and so they're all going to be unique in some way, even though they kind of have the same paradigm that God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Uncharted have followed. Last of Us, but I'm now thinking of Nintendo franchises that did just cookie cut. And that's the new Super Mario Brothers games. The first one came out for the Wii, the second one for the Wii U, and then there was a DS one. Actually, the first one came out for DS, and then there was a 3DS. There's 2 of them on 3DS, I think. I can't even keep them straight because it's like new Super Mario Brothers, new Super Mario Brothers 2, new Super Mario Brothers Wii U. Yeah, and so like those are all like the modern side-scrolling ones with the co-op added in, and those very quickly fell off the radar. And maybe it was just because the Wii U was a bad console and no one bought it, and so the platform base, the player base was bad. I don't know, but whenever Nintendo doesn't change, it seems they fall off a cliff quickly. Yeah. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 were awesome, and then they came out... Oh, Sunshine, back then, people didn't like that. Like, they wanted more Mario 64. They didn't like Sunshine, so people hated on that. But they quickly went back to Mario Galaxy, which is almost a step back to Mario 64 with a unique twist. And now Mario Odyssey is like a throwback to Galaxy, which we haven't...
And also a throwback to
Mario 64.
Well, and it has a lot of elements of... It reminded me a lot of Mario Sunshine, which I love. Yeah. So, like, it's almost like they're doing a really good job of kind of, like, blending all their things together.
And then Mario 3D Land and Mario 3D World, I mean, they weren't like received by the gaming community as, like, amazing Mario games, although they are. They're amazing games. They're all so good. Nintendo is just, like... they don't... So whenever they don't innovate, they seem to get slammed the worst. Like, Assassin's Creed is still going strong. Yeah. And they're the same. Call of Duty is still going strong, and they're exactly the same. Halo has always gone strong. They're starting to hit some rocky waters now, and forcing them to... But, like, all of these other franchises that go for years, and I think Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty are the biggest ones. But Battlefield is closely behind. Those are those yearly franchise games. Every single year you get another Call of Duty. You get another Assassin's Creed. And they're not changing, but they're still making so much money, and they're so received well.
And it's like...
Nintendo can't do that. When they keep doing that, they get stomped harder than anyone else. It's so weird.
It's you're right. It's very weird because it's almost like, what do you want? what do you want, gamers? You want these games to stay the same? And I'll be the first one to criticize Assassin's Creed for not innovating, but at the same time, I'm also sitting here being like, but games don't have to innovate to do well. So that's why I'm saying it's so hard to predict and super complicated because it's, in a lot of ways, like you said, it comes out to money for one. Like developers are gonna go in the direction that they think will make the most money for their game, more or less. Like artistic vision and all that stuff, sure, but like at the end of the day, like they're hoping their artistic vision makes a lot of money. And then on the side of the gamers, like they're gonna spend their money on the games that they think are gonna be good. And they make those decisions based off of a number of factors, some of which include how much is this game going to stay the same and how much of this game is going to be different. Yeah. And that's going to be different per title, too. Some games, again... it's not only going to be different per title, but it's going to be different per gamer, too. So one gamer is going to be like, this game looks stupid because it looks like they're not changing anything. Another person's going to be like, this game doesn't look like the game that it used to be, you know? So...
They've changed it too much.
Yeah, exactly. So...
And there's this weird, like, undescribable and, like, urge or I don't know instinct that makes that presumption the moment a game is talked about. Like when everyone showed Wind Waker for the first time, Nintendo, everyone hated it. I was like, this game looks amazing. I can't wait to play it. This is going to be so amazing. I think the cell shading and the emotions that you can show with it are just awesome for Zelda, and it brings a whole like humanity level to it that's just undone before, in a level that like Pixar did with computer animation. I was in. Where like everyone's like, this isn't Ocarina of Time, plus. This isn't that tech demo you showed us of Link versus Ganondorf, and the same thing kind of happened for Wii U. They had the Zelda tech demo where Link fought a spider, and it looked all like 1080 and pretty and gorgeous and stuff. And then we didn't see a single Zelda title on the Wii U until Breath of the Wild, which then became a Switch game. So like, and it didn't look anything like that tech demo.
Right.
And so people were all up in arms when Breath of the Wild was showed off. Like, oh, they went back to the cell shading and stuff, and open world they changed it. I just want the Ocarina of Time that looks pretty. I'm like, but and so in that regard, I'm like, don't stay the same.
Right.
But then I like my Battlefield games, and they're pretty much the same.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting topic. So we'd love to hear what you guys think, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on. I know we titled this as genre relevancy, but it did kind of become more about like innovations within franchises and innovations between franchises. But still, I think it kind of all falls down to the idea of like, can games stay relevant? And so that's what we love to hear from you guys. Can games and game genres or game types or game clones, whatever, can they stay relevant as the industry marches forward with its innovations? So we'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Termite sprung you guys in the middle of the podcast with all the places you can find us, but instead of rewinding, we'll go ahead and tell you again here. You can find us at Twitter, you can find us at Reddit, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, all at 80-bit Podsmash.
All one word, all lowercase.
Yep, no hyphens.
Two things you can do for us to help us grow ourselves and to expose our audience to new people, and that is to write us a review on iTunes, please. Give us a star rating, but also share our stuff on social media. If you guys share it with your friends or quote us, then that increases our exposure exponentially.
Yep,
so feel free to share our stuff on Facebook. That's part of the reason why I wanted to stay family friendly. Is because we shouldn't be saying anything offensive to your friends, so that no one can be scared to share something they might like. Yep. Other than you might be labeled as a gamer. Yep. And that's not so bad.
Gosh. I don't know. It's getting worse these days.
So yes, like, share, and subscribe our stuff, please.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, that was our episode for the day, and we hope you all have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week with a new topic and a whole bunch of new fun, witty witticisms between the two of us. But until then,
have a good week.
Play on, Podsmashers!